Hello, everyone, and this is Mark Young, and welcome to my webinar on using DevOps to manage 3D experience environments. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, thank you. So hi, once again, my name is Mark Young with XLM Solutions, and today's webinar will be on using DevOps to manage multiple 3D experience environments. If anyone has any issues hearing me or seeing the presentation, please let me know or put the information into the chat window. With that being said, let's get started here. For those of you who are not familiar with XLM Solutions, we are a complete PLM service provider. So we provide solutions around obviously the 3D experience or Innovia platform, both on cloud and on premise. We do work with the SolidWorks application, SolidWorks PDM, and then deal with some legacy Dassault applications like Innovia Smart Team, Innovia VPM, the search tools, Exelead, which now has been rebranded NetVibes. And then we deal with some ancillary other PLM systems and tangential technologies. We've been around since 2005. So we're bringing 20 years or almost 20 years of experience in the PLM industry. And we're highly respected for both our business and technical expertise around PLM. We are a Dassault business partner along with a SolidWorks certified professional service company. And, we are always dedicating ourselves to excellence, always making sure we're up on the latest trends and best practices in the PLM, area, both from a business process point of view, but also a technology point of view, regarding the different technologies out there, which we'll talk about today with DevOps. As a company, though, we provide all aspects of what we consider PLM, services and solutions, everything from doing discovery workshops to implementations, installations, upgrades, customizations, integrations, data migrations, and then training and support, and can provide a lot of cross-industry experience, from the anything from aero industry to automotive to medical devices, electronics. Really, we go across industries with the expertise we can provide. So let's get into the presentation and go back here. So today this presentation will discuss various DevOps, or what we'll get into is Dev Security Ops concepts, and how a good DevOps process in place can streamline your 3D experience infrastructure and allow you to easily facilitate rolling out changes and updates within your 3D experience environment. The session will go into detail, how you can use 3D experience to automate and update and push changes to your 3D experience. And we'll talk about how does 3D experience fit into, or what is DevOps in general. How does 3D experience fit into it? A little bit hands-on, seeing how 3D experience and DevOps works. We'll talk about infrastructure management, automation, automated testing, and different perspectives. Do an example of how we can do load balancing testing using some of the DevOps solutions, and then talk about the business value a little bit. So I will say, as I am obviously technical within deploying DevOps and 3D experience. I'm not an expert in every detailed instance of DevOps, or it covers a lot of broad range of technologies. So if you do have detailed questions, please write them, and I'll get with my experts to get back to you. So what is DevOps? And I think DevOps you hear a lot as a very big buzzword today in the market. Oh yes, we have DevOps, we need DevOps, but do people really know what DevOps are and how they're used? So I say DevOps is really a set of methodologies and tools to help integrate and automate, software development and IT operations. And really that's going to allow you to shorten and improve the life cycle in rolling out or updating, new, I'll just use the non-technical term of stuff to your users. And that stuff could be anything from code, security updates, new servers, upgrades, etc. Um, the term DevOps is really now is being extended to be called DevSecOps. So DevSecOps aims to, in addition to doing everything I said, to reduce the risk of releasing code with security vulnerabilities and to automate the protection of the software delivery cycle. So, we hear about cyber and cyber attacks now. So security is now a part of DevOps. Um, a lot of times customers say, yes, we do DevOps, but do they really do it? So when I look at DevOps, one of the things I like to break it down into is what's called the CALMS framework. And there's a link here to the CALMS framework, but that really breaks DevOps down into different components where you have the culture of embracing DevOps, embracing, organizational change management, changing your culture of how you're going to deploy and manage applications within your organization. Automation, the ability to automate tasks, reduce manual work, um, and be able to automate rolling out new code. Learning or being lean. I'm sorry. Um, removing low value activities and executing fast. Really, I've seen a lot of cases where there's a lot of manual work that is, non-value added being done in that process, and you can definitely get that non-value work out of it and automate it in a lot of cases to again increase a performance. Um, Measurement is you want to measure how you're doing with your DevOps operations. So you want to collect data, collect KPIs, monitor logs, make sure your time in your downtime is decreasing, your time to roll out upgrades is decreasing, your response time to issues is decreasing. So make sure you're measuring what you're doing and that it's actually providing a improvement to the business. And then finally, sharing. Providing lessons learned, doing retrospective or post-mortem analysis on what you did. Um, breaking down the silos, so that different groups within the organization, whether it's even within the same IT organization, understands what's going on and what's being done throughout the company. So I think all these points together really builds what is a DevOps. It's more than just a technology. It's actually a way of working within a company. And so to make sure everything is good here, which it looks like it is. Okay. So how does DevOps fit in with 3D Experience? In many cases within 3D Experience, while customers are rolling it out, um, they need multiple environments, and that's going to be a key topic within this presentation. But you'll need various environments to help roll out 3D Experience. Whether that be a sandbox environment, a development environment, a testing environment. And the question is, how can you clone, rehost, create these environments in a fast way. And we've been in situations where we had to work with a customer and provide some customization, but the prerequisite of that was having an environment to work on. And it took almost 2 weeks just to have an environment up and running for us to work on. And that was 2 weeks of wasted time, where having a good DevOps solution should be able to have an environment rolled out in hours or days versus weeks. In addition, and I should pause here and mention a lot of this stuff. We'll get to a slide, but a lot of the stuff deals with on-premise 3D experience implementations. A lot of this is not required for on cloud. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I just want to preface everything is that a lot of this really is for on-premise implementations. In addition to environment creation, there's maintenance. How do you handle ongoing support? Whether that be IT fixes, Java patches, FD fix development pack rollouts for 3D experience. How are you going to support those? Development, like I said, creating new environments to support new developments and then rolling out those developments. Handling migration projects and testing features and functions, rolling back features and functions based on issues, etc. So, if you look at 3D experience here, you look at a lot of different aspects that will affect 3D experience, and then doing various tests, scans for vulnerabilities, threats, etc. So all these different aspects come into play when talking about DevOps and 3D experience. Without having a DevOps solution, there's many steps involved in get back here. So there's many steps involved if you don't have a good, properly defined 3D experience. There's and with 3D experience and maintaining the 3D 3D experience infrastructure, there's many steps and many players involved in changes. And to make sure all changes are incorporated and rolled out properly, you need to have a good, again, system, process, and automation in place. Just example, there's 3D experience administrators that may administrate a 3D experience, but there may be system administrators that manage the the infrastructure, the underlying operating systems, whether that be Windows or Linux. And how do those two sets of players work together? There could be code developers versus solution architects, where the code developers are writing the code, but the solution architect is building the specs and requirements to build that code. So again, how does everyone play together in one good environment? When changes are made to production, I would always say, or try to get to a situation, is any changes to productions are automated changes. There's no human involvement. Now, obviously, there's a lot of human involvement before that, but to roll out changes to production, it should be an automated system and processes to do that. I've seen a lot of situations where, people made changes to production, someone forgot to do something, and now production is down and they got to backtrack the fixes and whatnot. So being able to automate all the necessary steps will obviously reduce, in again, such downtimes. Also, there's the case where I talk about static data, where an environment is built, a 3D experience environment is built, and people are using it to develop, test, etc. But then changes happen, or changes need to happen in the environment, whether new data is populated in it or someone else is making another change. And then in the other environment that users are using, they don't see those changes, or those changes aren't pushed out to them. and then they might be working off a old or a non-real world environment. So without DevOps, all these issues can come into play. And I'm going to say it's not like you say, oh, we have a DevOps solution and it's a magic button to fix them. But these are examples of issues where not having a good process and methodology in place will lead to issues. And then you can see some of the higher level issues again that could happen from a generic point of view without a DevOps solution. So I just mentioned DevOps and 3DEXPERIENCE and on-premise versus on-cloud environments. So DevOps are again, primarily probably going to come into place when you have on-premise environments. With the on-premise environments completely under the customer, your responsibility, and you as a company need to handle installations, monitor the system and monitor operations, handle upgrades and updates, security patches, etc. Changes to the system, whatever that may be. So all this work is the responsibility of the end company, whether they have a company supporting them or not. And this again is where the power of DevOps can help optimize a lot of these steps. Now for on-cloud customers, a lot of it's a SaaS environment, service as or think service as software. So Dassault is doing a lot of these works, and in addition here is missing backups and recovery strategy. But Dassault is doing a lot of that work, so they're provisioning the hardware, they're making sure that's all installed properly, monitoring it, making sure performance is up to date, handling upgrades and updates of both 3DEXPERIENCE and the operating systems, rolling out new functionality, approximately every 10 to 12 weeks, whether that's a major release or an FD release. So and doing backups and recoveries. So for the on cloud, where Dassault is doing a lot of the DevOps work for you, it's not on premise. Now we can have a whole discussion on should you go with on premise versus on cloud, and then there's a third option dealing with a hybrid cloud or a DS managed cloud versus the public cloud. But we can leave that for another story, or ping me later if you want to discuss that in more detail. One thing that's interesting that this recently has been released that I don't have listed here is in the past, the cloud really only had one cloud environment. And when we get into multiple environments in the next slide, it was hard to do with the on-cloud solution. But today, Dassault has released a cloud sandbox solution. So you can create multiple sandbox tenants of your cloud environment to do the various testing and whatnot. Now there's licensing for that. And when you create these other environments, your data is not populated in those environments, nor are your configurations for on cloud. So those are things to be aware of. That being said, there could be services to populate your data and or configurations to the different sandbox environments. Where on premise, you don't really have that situation. So that's something to consider. So, talking with multiple environments, I would say any enterprise that's rolling out 3DEXPERIENCE really should have multiple environments, and then managing them is where the difficulty comes into play. But there should be multiple environments, whether it's one to handle migration and migration testing, one for possibly debugging issues that users may have that come up in the environment, one for rolling out enhancements, new code, new functionality, patching handling operating system patches and fixes, and then 3D experience upgrades. So you don't have to have all these environments. Maybe you have more environments. Maybe you can have less, and some of these can be, merged into one environment. But there is definitely a need and a reason to have multiple environments. I put this at the top level. This is all kind of at the top, more from a development, purely IT point of view, or system integration point of view. But then we go down a level, there should be environments for users to do testing and QA in, quality assurance, possibly a training environment to do training in. And then finally that comes down into your gold, production environment that users are actually using. And these top environments should feed these, the lower level environments, which finally feed production. And then always off to the side, I say it's good to have a vanilla environment based on out of the box, because if you do run into issues, is it an issue that's unique to your environment and your configurations, or is it a out of the box, bug within 3D experience? And a lot of times, if you do come across an issue and you go to DeSoto support, they're going to say, can you reproduce this out of the box? And having that environment there to help you do that will be helpful in validating things between an out of the box functionality and your environment specific functionality. So it's always key to have a vanilla out of the box environment as well. So, when we talk about multiple environments, and this may be a busy slide, but let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, having multiple environments, you want to look at how you want to segregate the different environments. So you can have environments existing on completely different networks, where one environment, can't see data or can't ping or access computers on the other environment. Perhaps you have your production network, and then you have a test network that's completely isolated. So, there's, zero chance that a change you make in it would affect production because it's on a completely different environment. Um, and in such cases, if they're on completely different networks, you can have server names that are the same. So like the same production server names can be the same in that different test or QA network. Obviously, it's much harder to build and support these multiple networks that don't see each other, and it's a little bit harder to move changes from one environment to the other because the networks do not see each other, and you need a method to transfer data from one network to the other, hence one environment to the other. The next approach in segregating environments may be, they're all on the same network, but you have different servers that represent the different environments. In this case, you may need more hardware and resources for the different servers, but you don't need to support another network. Going down in the list, you could have the same network and shared servers. So perhaps you have different environments, but they're all sharing a couple servers, like the database server is shared across the different environments. And that can let you reduce hardware and resource needs, but you got to be careful if you're doing anything in the database, it's managing all environments, including production. And then finally, having what I would say is local and sandbox instances. So these are individual environments that are very good for developing code or customizations, having users look at new functionality after an upgrade, and they're easier to offer for key users or admins to experiment. So these are what I'd kind of say are one instance or single instance environments where almost all the 3D experience services are running on one machine and can be deployed to multiple users if necessary for each of them to have their own environments. Um, all that being said, there's a lot of different technologies that will support the different DevOps, functionality, and we'll get into that in the next slide. And this infinity loop here really is a key um, symbol that you'll see in across all DevOps stuff. And the thought is continuous improvement, continuous deployment, where you're consistently writing code, planning for it to be released, you know, or I'm sorry, planning what code to write, writing the code, creating a build for the code, testing it, releasing it into production, deploying it in production, having users use it and operating it, which then leads to more changes and whatnot. So it's a continuous loop of rolling out new functionality and having it deployed into production. Let's go see if there's any. I assume everyone can hear me. One person mentioned that no, it's not audible. So I assume everyone can hear me. If not, then again, please raise your hands. So what are all these different terms I listed in my last slide? This is probably a busy slide to read. I will go through it fast, but whoever wants the presentation can get it, or a recording of the environment. So IDE will be a term you may hear a lot. It stands for Integrated Development Environment, and these are environments like Visual Studio or Eclipse for Java. And they're a environment where you can write your code, you can do debugging, you can reference in other libraries, you can even run cyber reviews within it on your code through various packages. So any developer is probably using some type of IDE to develop the environment. There's Git Labs. You might hear of GitHubs, which is a code repository, kind of like a PLM system for your code. But there's also Git Labs, which is a complete platform for managing the DevOps and the security ops, and has a lot of that code building, be able to build and compile the code, and then push it out and maintain the code. Jenkins, which is an open source automation tool, for developers. Again, it helps you build the code, test it, and deploy it. SonarQube is open source for reviewing and inspecting the code for quality, making sure there's no uh, poor QA in the code and openings for cyber attacks or issues or performance issues, etc. Um, Artifactory is kind of a repository for managing all the artifacts dealing with a deployment, so whether that be binaries, files like configuration files or parameter files, containers we'll talk about, etc. But managing all those artifacts. So when you're building a new server, you can take those artifacts and deploy them, register the code, etc. as necessary. Um, Nexus is a similar type of solution to do the same thing with managing the artifacts. Gradle is a software build automation tool um, to help build and deploy the software. Maven is a software project management tool. Ant is another software build automation tool. Yum is a command line package management tool for Linux distributions. So if you're rolling out different Linux environments and you need to have Linux configured in a certain way, and for example, 3DEXPERIENCE needs it configured in a certain way, you can build these command line packages to build your Linux environments as needed for multiple environments without doing it by hand. Chocolate is similar tool but used for Windows. And then Grafana is more analytic software for monitoring and displaying data over the web. And we've used it, and we'll show an example of how we used it for load testing. Then there's the concept of containers and DevOps. So there's the concept of building like a container, like almost like a virtual environment, a VM, but more on the server side where you can roll out multiple 3D experiences through these different containers. So the containers like the master, and then you can build off that, unique 3D experience environments for users to use. And this is where you can create new environments really quickly. So, it's a type of container that packages all your dependencies together and ensures that your application works seamlessly in any environment through almost like this one containerized solution. 3DEX can be put into a Docker. Docker is one type of container solution. But 3D Experience has a heavy footprint. Usually there's multiple servers involved, and multiple things involved. So spinning up, a container to run 3D Experience, takes some work and effort, but once done, you can have these environments a lot faster. Obviously, we talked about stale environments. Changes to any 3D environment, whether it's code change, configuration change, data model change, etc., would need to be managed and those changes rolled out into the container when you spin out new environments. And then finally, the two main container solutions out there are Docker and then Kubernetes as well. So, if you are looking into how we can containerize 3D experience, you may want to look at these technologies, but really you would probably look at and come to us as the experts on how to build those containers for you to easily roll out to your environments. So, again, having infrastructure management and automation when you're rolling out new functionality, and we'll talk about a couple things here in these two parts of the slide. But so when you are creating new environments, for what they may be, there's a lot of aspects that you need to think about. So first of all, you need to manage users in 3DX, the 3X experience environment, but also users at the operating system. So if you're going to roll out a new environment for testing and you have LDAP, let's say, configured, should those 3D experience users now need to be reconfigured for LDAP? Maybe yes, maybe no. But when you're managing users in multiple environments, you got to think about both the 3D experience user and the operating system user. Or for example, in production, you may be a regular user, but in a test environment, maybe you're going to be a more powerful user because you got to do other types of tests. You need to manage licensing, what roles you have between the different environments. So obviously the Dassault licenses are expensive. They are name-based users, and if you're going to have multiple environments, how are you going to manage the different users and the different roles they have across those environments? How you want to manage, roles and people and organization structure. Again, like I said, you might have user one who is a leader in the production environment, but needs to be an admin and test. Perhaps they only have the Zen role in production, though they need to have Zen, engineering release, and product architect in the test environments. So how do you want to manage having that user having different roles across different environments? Again, refreshing environments with the latest changes, make sure you can do that in an automated way. When you are creating these different environments, making sure the right data is in the right environment. So a lot of cases, we're dealing with companies that have secure data, whether that's secure intellectual property data, regulated data like ITAR, or even personal data, and having the right users be able to see the right data. For example, a U.S. aerospace company cannot have non-U.S. people working on the environment. But when dealing with 3DEXPERIENCE, there's many good resources around the world. So how can we get a non-U.S. person to work in an environment to help deploy it, configure it, customize it, etc., but not have that correct, the data needed into it? So again, there's ways and methods where we can strip the data so we can build environments that have data just for, the right people to see it. And should such data be encrypted? If it is going to other users, do we need to perform some type of encryption? So, that's one concept to think about when, dealing and creating multiple environments. Here's another thought for an environment that's going to be upgraded. And this comes from an Excel spreadsheet. I'm not going to go through everything, but here's all sorts of steps, and these are manual steps that need to be done to help with the upgrade. And there's steps like import P&O, stop the search index, stop the FTS index, start the nocast instance. And these are all manual steps that needs to be run and performed to do it. So again, with humans doing it, there's human error and things can always go wrong. We had an upgrade where dealing with FTS, it was not stopped properly. And when we went to go to re-index our data after our upgrade, there was issues. So having ways to automate this will really reduce the risk when doing upgrades and save time and money in the foreseeable future. Now it takes time and money to build all that automation, but once in place, it can really save time, money, resources, and make your upgrades much leaner, as mentioned. With DevOps, there's always the keyword of CI/CD, which again goes back to my infinity slide of continuous integration, continuous delivery, and deployment. Again, at a high level, automating different tasks and monitoring different tasks within it. Monitoring different configurations and customizations within the application. So going down configurations, customizations on top of the platform, and then underneath the platform, making sure you have the proper architecture and server sizing and infrastructure in place. And then, managing the different aspects, that go into the platform, your WAR files, your customization packages. Spinner's a little bit of an older term used, but any spinner configurations, etc. So be able to distribute those and automate the rollout of those through continuous integration and deployment. Here is a example, and I'll run the video. The video maybe is not the most exciting, but we developed a custom widget for a customer. And when we were testing it in a single instance with a single user, everything performed great. As soon as we rolled it out to more of a QA, a multiple testing, and more than one user started using it, and we did test cases with 5 users, it brought down 3DEXPERIENCE. It not only was the widget unusable, it would bring down 3DEXPERIENCE. So we needed to figure out how can we improve the widget without getting 5 people manually to test all the time. So we made use of a solution using Grana to optimize the running of the widget with multiple users and then monitoring the performance. So we could make code changes, run multiple load balancing tests with multiple users on a single machine, and then monitoring those aspects. So if I go to play this video, It might be hard to see, but here we're using Grata as a command line tool to launch multiple 3D experience instances at once to load our widget. Then the widget performs different functionality. So here we're monitoring the time between each functionality. So to load this table down below, that was one time being managed. And then it's going to fill in information in the table. That's more time being managed. And then finally, it's going to load some additional tables lower on within the screen that you're not seeing here. So through Granada and this command line software here, which is based on JavaScript, we could run multiple instances and see the performance of how the widget is performing in each different aspect of the widget. There's different functionality happening. So breaking that down into different instances to monitoring the time and whatnot. And then this could be actually imported into a graphical interface to report on those instances. So here's an example of how we use Grata software to do load balance testing. Another thought where it comes into 3D experience is proactive monitoring. So we also have tools and systems to proactively monitor the 3D experience and make sure it's healthy and up and running, and preactively or proactively, resolve issues before they happen. So we have tools and technology that can be used to create these proactive monitoring, dashboards, that can make sure all the, 3D experience services are up and running and are healthy. That the servers have enough Java memory, garbage collection is happening, making sure there's enough disk space, running tidiness, which are different 3D experience applications to clean up the vault and other things within the database. Make sure your license server is running, your certificates are valid and not going to expire. Making sure the space index, this is the searching, is optimized properly. You see a lot of performance issues. Do database tuning as necessary. Making sure that, again, that the database is optimized and performing properly. And then having, the real-time monitoring dashboards to, detect issues, have dashboards for, possible visibility of issues and resolution. So there's also on top of, talking about monitoring, ways to build, various dashboards or technologies to do that monitoring. The business value, Dassault's rolling out new features and new fixbacks all the time. And many cases, by the time the customer upgrades, a new version or even two new versions is released. So I just go back to DevOps as a way or something you can look into, increase overall efficiency, shift the upgrade, the deployment time to the left, and focus more on business and business improvements than IT. And obviously this reduce time to market and keep you more on the Dassault roadmap of being up to date on the latest Dassault revisions of the software. To recap, I say these are technical challenges without having a DevOps solution or lessons learned. Upgrades will be hard. There's many, many steps involved, and keeping track of all those steps are hard and can be missed. So without having a good way to automate that, your upgrades will be hard. Time and cost to create new environments. So without having a good DevOps system, it takes time and takes money and resources to create those environments, which could be automated. Reducing your downtime. So how can you push out changes and reducing the downtime for that changes to be pushed out? Pushing out changes without a change review, making sure that any changes go through a proper review before they get pushed out. having these stale environments, so having people working on environments where other changes have been performed to them and what they're working on doesn't reflect the real environment today. We talked about, again, statically building different types of environments, keeping track of all the configurations to an environment. So you have multiple resources, you might have people making data model changes and have package files that need to be maintained, code changes that need to be maintained, parameter files, etc., and making sure those all kept changed in one place and being able to automatically, again, those artifacts rolled out into new environments, and then handling security. Making sure testing's not done by all user with an admin account, making sure the proper cybersecurity is being done and performed on the system. So these are all aspects of managing environments where issues can happen, but having a good DevOps solution in place will mitigate those solutions. So in conclusion, I think it's very important to educate management on a DevOps value. It does require funding, commitment, and staffing, but once it's in place, it can provide a lot of value. Embrace it more as just a buzzword, saying, "Hey, we do DevOps." I mean, going back to my slide, that CALMS framework, there's a lot to it and a lot that can be applied to it. Using the full framework. And if it's used and deployed properly, it will decrease your development upgrade rollout times and reduce issues and downtime and increase profitability. So it really can, provide a great solution. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and open it up to questions. If there's any questions. So one question I have, is it possible to implement a CI/CD for DS Cloud tenants? Any provable scenarios there? So, I would say yes. You maybe not be able to fully functionally create a CI/CD, continuous improvement, continuous deployment for cloud, or maybe it's something we need to think more about, but I think the technology is there to do it. So as mentioned, you can, spin off sandboxed environments. You can automate solutions to move your configurations into the sandbox environment. Now that is work that would need to be done, but that can be done. And then you could automate rolling out, changes from that sandbox environment back into the production environment, whether that's a configuration change or customization. So I think, yes, it can be done. It is possible. I don't think there's a unique working solution today. I think a little bit of time and effort would have to go into making that happen, but it's doable. Next question. It talked about, some of those DevOps technologies, and again, I'm not an expert in all of them. A lot of them are open source technologies, so they're free to use. Now you want to make sure any customer you're working with will allow those open source technologies. There are certain customers that do not allow open source technologies in their environments, but a lot of them are open source and can be fairly easily used to deploy. But yes, I would recommend you bring in experts within it to help you deploy such technology and then the overall deployment architecture. Someone commented, saying that a lot of the stuff I said is great. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's getting management's buy-in to actually deploy it and build such automated solutions. And yes, that's exactly correct. We worked with one customer that spent a lot of time on a great DevOps solution. And they were really ready to, let's say, rock and roll and deploy a new, 3DEXPERIENCE PLM solution based on it. And then management came and said, well, what do you have to show to us? And management was looking more for the system working, where they worked more on the infrastructure to get the system to work. So that you need management buy-in, and you need to balance you know expectations and resources, and explain why budget and money is going to this, but there will be a lot of improvements in the long run. One question regarding our load balancing solution that we showed the video of. Um, the video wasn't super sexy with pictures, but yeah, how we set that up and deployed it, we used Granada technology with JavaScript. You can reach out to me afterwards and I can provide more details on how we did that. So again, going back to our solution using Grafana, um, we used it with JavaScript, and it was monitoring different loading times of different components of our widget. So it would allow us to create multiple 3DEXPERIENCE instances, and then for each instance, monitor the time it took to do different operations within that instance. I can again, I can talk to you offline to discuss how that worked and give you a little bit better details of that. I did not create that solution specifically, so I can get back to our experts and come back to you on it. Do you know if Dassault is committed to make it easier to implement DevOps with 3DEXPERIENCE? Um, it looks like a lot of this work should be done by the developer and the platform, and not by the customer. So I would tell you, this is my answer that I would think Dassault would say. They would say go with our on cloud solution, where we are doing a lot of that for you. And they're pushing obviously the on cloud solution. For on premise customers, um, I think to be honest, you're a little bit left behind, and you need to do a lot of this yourself. And as Dassault, as much as you put pressure on Dassault, maybe they will improve it, but they do leave a lot of it to you to do. Unfortunately, their answer is, if you don't want to do it, then go with our cloud solution. But I know there's many reasons why the cloud solution isn't the right fit for customers. Um, do you think Spinner is a valuable tool for implementing DevOps for 3DEXPERIENCE? I understand you need to buy a special license for it. So Spinner is a good tool for rolling out changes. It was really used a lot before, and this is getting into maybe some more technical terms, the UPS, the Unified Product Structure data model was rolled out, and more for the older Designer Central data models. But it lets you, roll out and push changes into the 3DEXPERIENCE model. Um, I think today Spinner is not as useful, um, but it is a way to manage and spin out and spin in changes. So depending on how you're using 3DEXPERIENCE, it it may be available within a DevOps solution, but I think it really depends on your unique situation. I say today, more Spinner is becoming less and less important today. Um,
And Mark, just to interject
Yep. And sorry,
regarding
this is my
Spina.
colleague Elon here.
Yes, sorry. So one thing, because we have a few customers who are using Spinner with both UPS and the older central data model. The problem that we're having, and we kind of had to develop a process, it could be automated or manual, is that Spinner has obviously its own package version of the code, metadata, and whatnot. Whereas, like Mark mentioned earlier, you want to maintain continuous, kind of automate any build that went through unit testing and user testing back into the platform. So there's a little bit of disconnect, between Spinner and the build versions that you're having versus the latest code, which normally would be in a Git or any repository. And so yes, you can use it by itself. It could be the master, though you have to kind of bridge over the disconnect between the source code and Spinner. Spinner is the master. How can you need to go back to your Git repo. How do you kind of align the two as long as there's a process in place and maybe use some Jira or something along with the two to kind of bridge over. It's doable by itself. It may not be enough. If you need to go back and for deployment, yes. If you need to go back and make some quick update and automate the build and everything. I mean, again, Spinner is a piece of the puzzle, but you need a process around it. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Elon. Um, so that looks like all the questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out and email me per the contact information on the screen. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. If you have any suggestions for future webinars, we would love to hear it. Um, and with that, I will say goodbye. Thank you once again.